Howdy, Michael, a Mercedes guy here, and I'm going to explain how to bleed your hydraulic clutch system. If you have a standard transmission, it's not manual linkage, it's hydraulic. There'll be the early type is a master cylinder in the engine compartment. The later type, the master cylinder is under the dash. The master cylinder for the clutch. It has a bleeder on it. This is a later clutch slave cylinder, so this is what actuates the fork. The earlier one is a little smaller. They also have a bleeder. Now you would think that you bleed this and open up this, and while somebody's pushing on the clutch, you bleed going this direction down to the slave. That's not the way you bleed. You won't have success. You'll do it over and over, and you still won't have much movement in the slave cylinder. So what you do is you use a piece of tubing and open up the bleeder screw on the left front or right front brake caliper. Now it's left or right depending on where this slave cylinder is located. The early cars, it's on the driver's side. The later, it's on the passenger side. So you open up. What I do first is I have a helper and a roll of Teflon tape. I take the bleeder screw clear out of the caliper and have my helper hold his finger over the hole immediately. And I wrap Teflon tape around the bleeder screw threads. Then I put that bleeder screw back in and tighten it slightly. Then I do the same thing on the bleeder screw for the clutch slave cylinder. Wrap some Teflon tape around the threads. The reason for that is to not permit air or fluid to get by those threads. Then I like using somewhat clear tubing because you can actually see the fluid in it. And shove it, first put in box end wrench, the proper size, sometimes it's 7, 8, or 9, over the bleeder screw on the brake caliper, and then the other end to the bleeder screw on the clutch slave cylinder. Then, so this is on the caliper, this is on your slave cylinder. You crack both bleeder screws and have a helper slowly push not the clutch, instead push the brake pedal down. And when he gets to the bottom, you tell him to tell you bottom, and you tighten both bleed screws. Then have your helper slowly let the brake pedal up and repeat the process. Open your bleeder screws slowly down, and you'll actually see the fluid travel. And then, as you do this process, you want the cap off of the reservoir for your clutch master cylinder. On the early type, it's a separate reservoir. On later cars, it's the same reservoir as for your brakes. So you want to monitor that fluid level and top it up as you do this process. And as you watch, as your helper pushes the brake pedal down, you'll see bubbles, air bubbles, coming up in the reservoir. Then, when he reaches, as I mentioned, the bottom of travel of the pedal, you close the bleeders, and you keep repeating this process until you no longer see air bubbles coming up in the reservoir. Tighten your bleeders tight. Check your clutch pedal travel, and you'll have nice pedal movement. And you're able to successfully bleed the system. And it even tells in the book, the big service manual, this process of doing it actually backwards. You force the fluid into the slave, up into your clutch master, and eventually into the reservoir. If you ever have any problems, give me a call. I prefer a telephone call over email, and I don't do text.